Want to teach your kids financial literacy, but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Slashes, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking, I'm sure they're religious. They have a very nice house. We're talking 3 syllables, Dracula. And we're talking The Count Meets Pride and Prejudice. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking The Blood of These Whores is Killing Me.
Oh my god. I knew you were going to take it, so I left it for you. Best line in the movie.
It's the best line. It was either that or it was going to be the way they say virgins. Wirgins.
A plethora of accents.
Yes, everyone, we are discussing Andy Warhol's Paul Morrissey's Blood for Dracula.
How dare you?
Companion piece. It's not a sequel, but it's like a, I don't know, production companion piece to Flesh for Frankenstein, which we covered about 2 years ago.
Gosh, yes, it's been that long. I was ready to revisit Paul Morrissey's world because it's just so utterly different from nearly everything else that we cover.
And that's kind of why I like it. I mean, these aren't like my favorite movies, but I like that they take Frankenstein and Dracula and just do something totally different with them. Like, I have never seen a Dracula like this before.
No, and folks, we teased it on the outro last week, but just if you have not watched the film or you plan to watch it after you listen to this, just content warning, there is sexual assault in this film.
Handled very lightly, if I might add.
It's weird. Yeah, we'll get into it.
We'll talk a lot about it. But before we do that, let me introduce our guest who is waiting in the wings. So, everyone, he is the co-host of Movie Oubliette, a podcast in which he and his co-host Dan review obscure, forgotten horror, sci-fi, and fantasy movies. He is also the co-host of The Queer Gaze, a YouTube channel in which he reacts to queer media from every country and every decade with, oh, well, would you look at that? Horror Queers co-host Joe Lipsett.
Oh, hey, that's me.
You may also remember him from our episode on 1981's Fear No Evil from way back in 2021. Please welcome back Conrad Chambers.
Hello there.
Hello.
You just wanted a visiting European dignitary to come into this one.
We needed to add some class to this film.
There we go.
Conrad, I take it this is your first time watching this film.
Very much so, yeah. In fact, I'm pretty much an Andy Warhol virgin at this point.
Oh, okay.
You know what? If I remember, I definitely was. But Joe, you were too when we did Flesh for Frankenstein, right?
I was. I mean, I'm obviously familiar with his art. I had seen some videos. He's a pop culture magnate. And yet, I'll confess, I didn't really know much about his movie output. But of course, if folks remember our episode on Flesh for Frankenstein, this is him in name only, and Paul Morrissey gets very upset when you refer to it as Andy Warhol's anything.
Well, everyone, I'll just take this moment then to direct you back to that Flesh for Frankenstein episode from 2 years ago. I did do an Andy Warhol primer. However, it's really not that important because, Andy Warhol has almost nothing to do with this movie. In fact, I believe the only thing he actually contributed to this film was the opening scene during the credits where we're watching Udo Kier's Dracula put his makeup on. Like, that was the idea Warhol contributed to this film.
All right, then.
But did Paul Morrissey even direct this movie? Because several Italian sources claim that it was Antonio Margheriti.
Yeah, so that was actually more an issue with Flesh for Frankenstein because, it was kind of that Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg poltergeist situation because, yes, some Italian prints credited second unit director Antonio Margheriti as the director of the film under his pseudonym Anthony M. Dawson, and this basically was to ensure that the film would obtain Italian nationality for the producers due to Italian laws. But in Flesh of Frankenstein, Margheriti did shoot some special effects scenes, including the scene from that movie with the breathing lungs. And I imagine some of the same stuff was here, but I didn't get any specific details about what he was involved with. Honestly, it was kind of one of those weird things where, because these films were shot back to back, there was a lot more specific information about Flesh for Frankenstein and less about Blood for Dracula. So in my production, I've actually tried to condense a lot of it because a lot of it is kind of repeat information, and there's not a ton of new information about this film, but it seems a lot of the way this was filmed was very similar to Flesh for Frankenstein in the sense that, for example, there wasn't a script for this movie before they started filming. Paul Morrissey would write the plot and dialogue in the car on his way to set, and then his assistant would type up the notes and he would quickly edit them before filming started. They would film in the morning, and then during the lunch break, he would do the same thing for the afternoon. He would be like, okay, what's the scenes in the afternoon going to be about? What are we going to say? And it was like that, and they did this all over the course of 3 weeks.
Oh, good grief. Yikes. That explains a lot.
Yes and no, because I would argue that this film kind of comes together pretty well. And I remember very much enjoying Flesh for Frankenstein. Like, if you told me that a film was shooting under that production schedule and that kind of screenplay writing, I would think it would be a complete disaster.
Yeah, that's true. And it does have some really memorable lines.
Well, I was actually going to say, I was waiting for Conrad to be like, well, it is a disaster. But, okay, let me just dive in here, because I've got a little bit of backstory. I have more backstory about how all this stuff came to be than the production itself, but it's still wild, because it's one of those things where it's like, like the weird connections that really famous film industry people have and how they kind of came together. So with this film, we're starting with producer Andrew Braunsberg, who in the late 60s was working with Roman Polanski. They were in the middle of planning a film called Day of the Dolphin that was going to star Jack Nicholson and Polanski's then wife, Sharon Tate. But she was murdered by the Manson family. So they obviously held off on that. They wound up deciding to make 1971's Macbeth, and I don't think Jack Nicholson was involved at this point. But this was when the company that produced the filming cameras for their films, so when they were filming Macbeth, this filming company was like, oh, hey, we just created this new camera that has new 3D technology. And so, okay, enter French producer Jean-Pierre Rassam, who introduced Braunsberg to Italian producer Carlo Ponti, the husband of Sophia Loren. Braunsberg went to Rome, met with him, and he was like, hey, do you want to do a movie with Roman Polanski? Ponti was like, sure, I love Roman Polanski. So they all met with Ponti, and Ponti asked them, what movie do you want to do? I don't know. Oh, well, I have this house in Positano. It's really nice. Why don't you go there and look for inspiration?
I love to visit a villa and just think about a movie and then shoot the movie there.
It's weird. This story felt very much like this guy just wanted to show off his house, because it was one of those houses, too, where you could only access it by using a private cable car from the ground floor, and it was up on a hill.
Wow. Okay.
Nice.
So on the way back, they come up with idea for the film What? ? And that's kind of what Braunsberg and Polanski are doing. But while all this is going on, Braunsberg could not get the idea of 3D out of his head, what those camera guys told him when they were making Macbeth. And so he was like, Polanski, we got to make a 3D film. And Polanski was like, I'm not really feeling that anymore. So I'm going to go make Chinatown in the States. And he did, which also starred Jack Nicholson. So I think that was where that kind of came from after the Sharon Tate stuff. But Bronsberg stayed in Rome and had read about Paul Morrissey, who at the time was making a big name for himself. He was arguably the most well-known or famous artist under the Andy Warhol factory umbrella. And again, everyone, go back to that Flesh of Frankenstein episode for a primer on that. I still, to this day, don't really understand what the factory was. It just seemed like a bunch of people in a house or a factory on drugs making art.
Yeah, we said this. It's basically John Waters, only with other weirdos.
Yeah, exactly. But, he was making many low-budget films for Warhol. So Bronsberg called up Morrissey and was like, hey, I really want to make a film for you. And they were like, sure, let's go meet Carlo Ponti. So again, we're having this meeting with Carlo Ponti, Paul Morrissey, and this Bronsberg guy. And so Morrissey's like, oh, I really want to do a horror film. And basically, this is kind of where Morrissey doesn't mince words when talking about certain things. So everyone, both of these have Severin film Blu-ray releases, and Morrissey has a 35-minute interview on this, and he does not mince words when talking about anyone he doesn't really care about. So when talking about Carlo Ponti, he was like, yeah, this man had no personality. He was just a businessman behind a desk. But he was like, yeah, let's make a Frankenstein movie. It'll take 3 weeks. And he goes, cool, well, I'll give you $300,000. And Ponti was like, continuing, but I'm giving you $300,000. You say you can film Frankenstein in 3 weeks. Why don't you make 2 movies? Okay. Sure. Well, what do you want to make? Dracula. Let's do a Dracula movie. So this was all just decided on the fly because they just felt like doing it.
So wait, did he give him more money to make a second film? Or was it like, I'm giving you this money, take another 3 weeks and shoot a second film?
It sounds like the money was for all of it. Because I think he was kind of like, oh, you can film it in 3 weeks? Shit, that money, you're not going to spend all the money. So do this.
Okay.
But I guess, Bronsberg had already talked to Ponti about doing a 3D film because it was Ponti who said, oh, you should do both of these movies in 3D, which Bronsberg then obviously agreed with. And then Morrissey was like, well, okay, but just so you know, I like to make movies without scripts. I like to make movies on the fly. And Ponti, who just hands over $300,000, just goes, yeah, that's fine.
Oh boy, I don't think that shooting movies on the fly is conducive to working with 3D technology.
Well, so that's the other thing. Okay, so Flesh of Frankenstein shoots in the spring of 1973, and one day after the principal shooting for it was completed, Morrissey had actors Udo Kier, Joe D'Alessandro, and Arno Jorning, all of whom were in Flesh of Frankenstein, get shorter haircuts so that filming for Blood for Dracula could begin immediately. However, the 3D was a problem during Flesh of Frankenstein because Morrissey wasn't upfront about the fact that he was mostly blind in one of his eyes.
Oh, no.
So he asked them to not do Blood for Dracula in 3D, which is why Flesh of Frankenstein is and Blood for Dracula is not.
Right. Okay.
Oddly enough, though, Sergeant Zelenovic, who played the male monster in Flesh of Frankenstein, was supposed to play Dracula in Blood for Dracula. I don't even think Udo Kier was supposed to be in this movie. But there was a problem with his work permit, so they had to look elsewhere. And they had they actually auditioned actors. I mean, a bunch of actors came to the studio because they were like, oh my god, I get to play Dracula in a Dracula movie. But
sure, it's huge.
The cinematographer for both films, Luigi Cavalier, he suggested that Udo Kier just play the part, and Morrissey agreed and was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. He's right here, and he has a very weird look about him. Those are his words. But he told Kier, well, listen, dude, Dracula in this movie is starving, he hasn't been able to eat, he's weak, so you need to lose 10 pounds by the end of the week. So... Udo Kier just stopped eating. He just drank water and he had a lettuce leaf here and there. And after a week, he was so weak that he had to be carried in a wheelchair, which they wound up using in the film. That's why Udo Kier is in a wheelchair for pretty much all of his scenes in this movie.
Yikes.
That's pretty method.
Right? Yeah. But I guess in their minds, it's just a 3-week thing. I'll be able to eat later.
Sure. It's a cube of cheese before lunch, a cube of cheese after lunch, and then we're off to Paris Fashion Week.
Yes. And again, as I said, just like Flesh of Frankenstein, Morrissey wrote the film as they were shooting. And I already kind of explained the process, but I do want to say the woman that was doing all of this for him is Pat Hackett. Again, I talked about her in Flesh of Frankenstein, but she's basically the Deborah Hill to Morrissey's John Carpenter. Carpenter. Or honestly, sometimes I would say the Daria Nicolodi to his Dario Argento, because it seems like she did a lot of work and isn't credited.
Okay.
But she's also, like, because she was really involved in the factory, she is the sole editor of Andy Warhol's 800-page memoir that was, I think, published posthumously, the Andy Warhol Diaries, because she would literally just write down everything Warhol said and make notes about it.
Okay, that's comprehensive.
Yeah. So if you really want to know about Andy Warhol, I guess maybe go read that memoir. When it comes to the vibe of these films, Morrissey says that he likes and he loves the Frankenstein and Dracula, his films of these, because they were funny. They're not out to scare you. And he didn't think he could make a Frankenstein or Dracula movie seriously. And he's like, well, they're serious parts, but to him, they're absurd. And then he kind of goes off on this, maybe it's not a tangent, but he really, really is big into this idea that the second half of the 20th century, life was over, the world was over, nothing meant anything, life is trash, life is not good, so you couldn't take anything seriously.
That's very prescient for the days and times that we live in now.
Right? And, this is the 70s, right? So, like, a lot of political turmoil going on at the time. I think we're in Vietnam right now. So it's just like everyone is kind of like not happy. So he just wants to make something that's a horror film that's funny. And I would argue I do find this movie funnier than Flesh of Frankenstein, but then there are some parts that are very much not funny. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it does fit into that whole kitsch approach to trash art that Warhol was apparently a big exponent of. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not an expert on Warhol. This is my first opportunity to research him. The only thing I knew before this was that David Bowie played him in a movie once.
Right.
But having researched it a little bit, so Andy Warhol it sort of diffused criticism of his own art by saying that it was trash. So I think that's sort of the tongue-in-cheek approach that they're taking to this movie as well.
Right.
It's not to be taken seriously, I don't think.
No. And I actually really like that term kitsch, because I think a lot of people are going to feel inclined to call this camp. And by virtue of what you said, Trace, the fact that he is deliberately setting out to make this a comedy, obviously there can be intentional camp. It's usually quite a bit harder to achieve, but I think kitsch is a better description for the end result.
Yeah, I will say, so on this Blu-ray, there's a 20-minute interview with, I want to say a film historian, Stephen Thrower. It's called The Blood of These Whores, by the way.
Okay.
But he does an analysis of the film, and he says, Morrissey doesn't employ camp in this film. He employs a lot of other techniques, but camp isn't one of them. And so I'm glad that you said that, Conrad, about kitsch, because I think that's a very important distinction. But I guess in this way, how would y'all define kitsch?
I think it's supposed to allow art to be relished because of and not despite of its inferior quality and poor taste. That's generally the idea behind it. So, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because this movie kind of feels like, certainly in terms of the performance and the professionalism of the execution, just a step above porn.
Yeah.
But,
it is X-rated.
Yeah, that's true.
So, because when this was released, it wasn't released as Blood for Dracula. It was released as Andy Warhol's Dracula in both West Germany in March of 1973 and the United States in November of 74.
Right.
Weirdly, so this movie is an hour and 44 minutes long, but in Italy, a 98-minute version was released theatrically in August of 75. And the title, Dracula is searching for virgin's blood and he died of thirst.
Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
In the UK, the film passed with cuts to 103 minutes, which that's the version I have on this Blu-ray. So I don't know if there's a longer cut of this movie, but they did this to avoid it being labeled as a video nasty, whereas I'm pretty sure Flesh of Frankenstein was a video nasty.
If memory serves correct, yeah.
But okay, so back to Andy Warhol, though. So again, his name is all over this thing. And when asked about how he contributed to the film, Warhol responded, and I quote, "I go to the parties. All of us at the factory contribute ideas."
Oh, boy. If I could just get away with not working and saying, well, I just go to the parties.
So, okay, this is going to be a little bit controversial. So Morrissey goes on kind of a rant about Andy Warhol. And it's really interesting because Brownsburg talks about how, Morrissey was really happy to have Warhol's name all over it. And then you cut to the interview with Morrissey, and this is what he has to say. Also, I have to warn everyone, he is using the word autistic here in a...
derogatory.
It sounds kind of derogatory, so just warning for that. But this is what he says. Warhol's name was only on the film because I made him famous. He didn't have any rights. They just did it. So the newspapers would think that an artist, he was not an artist, would have something to do with the films. He wouldn't connect anything. He was so autistic. He didn't know good or bad about anything. He didn't know anything about art. He was a vegetable. He couldn't speak. I had to speak for him. To credit him was a crime against humanity because I made him famous. They gave him credit. He didn't ask for it. He had no rights to have his name connected with the movie, yet they put his name on the movie. I would have to go to court in every country to sue them, but I didn't have the money to do that. It didn't happen in America because in most cases I could control the contract, but I couldn't do it in other countries. I mean, you have no idea how autistic he was. He couldn't speak. Nobody's even written a book about him. There was nothing to write. There was nothing there.
Oh, boy. I mean, I certainly understand how seeing somebody else's name attributed to the art you make would be very galling, very upsetting, but that is just really fucking petty.
It's also really recent. This is like a 2021 Blu-ray release, and I think they did a lot of this over the pandemic. So he's also like really old.
Does anyone want to tell Morrissey that there's actually many books written about Andy Warhol?
Maybe it's his involvement. I don't know, but nevertheless, he had choice words to say about Andy Warhol.
That is one of my favorite things about Blu-ray special editions, when people involved in the production have reached a certain age where they have no fucks left to give, and they just tell it like it is. I really like it.
Well, because so often you turn it on and it says, you know, the filmmakers or the studio don't condone anything that's said in these special features. And you think, oh, please, what are we actually going to say that's controversial? And then every once in a while, you get somebody who's just mouthing off and you think, oh, okay, Joan, go. Have your say.
Yeah. Go full messy bitch who likes drama. That's what we're here for.
Truly. I mean, I do kind of love it, though.
It was an entertaining interview. I mean, I just, as you said, Conrad, when they have no fucks left to give, it just makes for really entertaining, if maybe not the most PC entertaining experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Blood for Dracula was not a financial success like Flesh for Frankenstein, and this was credited to the lack of 3D in the film.
Oh, come on.
Well, because whenever Flesh for Frankenstein came out, because again, the 3D was really big in like the 50s, right? And so during most of the 60s, it wasn't there, and so this was kind of seen as a new novelty gimmick in the same way of like, you know, the 3D boom we had in the late 2000s.
Sure. Yeah.
But it wasn't widely seen. But I mean, nevertheless, we're looking at a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.2 out of 10. But again, this is like 18 reviews, so it's like this wasn't widely seen at the time. And Letterboxd users have awarded it a 6.4 out of 10. So I think that's I gave this a 3.5, a 7. So that's about where I feel about it.
Curious, Conrad, what did you end up giving this?
Well, I don't habitually give things a star rating, I have to say, but it's a curious one. I'd probably sit it somewhere in the middle as well, because although I really do feel like, I mean, the movie has some problems, but aside from the problematic elements and also the low quality, there is a strange sort of melancholy air about it and a sardonic satire to it that I really enjoyed. And there are some fascinating themes at play underneath it all in terms of the aristocracy and so on that I found quite fascinating. So I was never bored. I was always really engaged with it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Where I also think the acting style in this movie is, I feel like everyone's doing something different.
Well, it's bananas, yeah. Like, we've got everybody acting in a completely different film, it seems like.
And again, for some people, I can understand why they might say, oh, that's really bad. But for me, I'm kind of like, well, it's good
entertaining.
It's good at being bad, I would say. But yeah, so that's all I've got, Joe. Let's dive into this quote unquote plot.
Okay, so over the credits, we watch Count Dracula, who's played by Udo Kier, very skinny, great cheekbones, and he is putting on makeup and painting his hair black, and we get to watch all of this in a single long take as the camera then sort of slowly pans around to reveal him sitting in front of a mirror, and of course his reflection is not visible, and then we watch the chair get pushed back as he moves away, but of course nobody is actually there.
I do love this opening shot because it has this wonderful, mournful music by Claudio Gizzi. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but this beautiful sort of stately, sad, woodwind-filled theme that it really reflects this guy who's, really on the wane. He's not in great shape. It's sort of the end of an era, the end of a dynasty. This is not Dracula in his prime. No. And there's also something really fun about seeing him. I mean, we're saying that it's not camp, but it does kind of look like he's getting made up for drag, which I kind of liked. He ended up looking like a new romantic pop star like Gary Newman.
Which I think the fact that again was Warhol's like main contribution to the film makes so much sense.
Yeah, I like what you said though, Conrad. I think that there's a sense of almost romanticism for this, and I'm going to refer to a couple of different pieces throughout this. Let me start off with Ian Murphy's Decadence and Decay in Paul Morrissey's Blood for Dracula. So he writes a very short article, but it's exclusively just about this opening scene and how it anticipates the film to come, and specifically Dracula's demise at the end of it. So he says, on initial viewing, this ritual of physical refinement seemingly represents nothing more than an act of artificial humanization. So it's Dracula trying to pretend that he's human before he goes out to face the world. Sorry, now back to Murphy. But then he continues, rather, Dracula's application of cosmetics encapsulates the decadence and decay of the Dracula line and foreshadows the reduction of an ancient aristocratic ancestry to a single mutilated corpse at the film's denouement.
Yeah, it's very true. It's sad and oddly poignant, isn't it? Watching him slowly try to cover up the signs of his decay and dilapidation.
And we've seen like vain Draculas before, but yeah, there's just something.
Well, this is different though, isn't it?
It is different, right? But it's also like you said earlier, Dracula's not really the main character in this story.
No. I mean, going into this, even on the box art for the film, for the Severin package, it's really Udo Kier covered in blood, front and center. And then you get into the film and it's really about the Di Fiore family, and Dracula just happens to be a house guest.
Yes. I mean, I would argue Anton, his manservant, has a bigger presence than Dracula in this film.
Oh my God. Okay, well, let's talk about Anton. So he is played by Arno Düring, and this guy, every line is a singular performance. This accent is so bizarre. There's a point where I think he breaks the fourth wall, and I could not tell if it's intentional, and it is so fucking good. I ate everything this man was putting on screen.
Yeah.
So Anton is his manservant, and he has developed a plan. So the Count has a sister who's played by Eleonora Zani, and they're basically both going into decline. So what we're going to do is put sister in her coffin in the vault in Romania, and then we're going to flee to Italy because, of course, we need the blood of virgins. That's this movie's sort of canonical contribution to vampire lore.
We need blood of wirgins. Thank you very much.
Sorry, blood of virgins. Yes. But I love the idea that, well, there's no virgins left in Romania, so we have to go to Italy because they're so deeply religious that they won't have fucked.
Little does he know.
This is hysterical to me, particularly in 1974. Like, we're in the height of women's liberation, and it's like, there's no virgins left. All of these sluts are out having sex.
Except I think this takes place in the 20s. I don't think it takes place in the 70s. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do also think, just to go back to the sister, are y'all a little disappointed we don't use this sister more? She doesn't play any part in this story except to be in this scene.
Yeah, she's still in deep storage at the end of it, isn't she?
Yes.
Yep. It feels like this would have been a sequel tease if we had made the film later, and it's like, oh, well, now it's Blood for Dracula's sister coming in 1975.
Maybe it was at the end of the credits and I missed it.
No, you can bump this movie up a half star if, like, once Dracula dies, and like the final shot is just we cut back to her coffin and she like busts out of it and is like, brother!
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd pay to see that.
Truly, yeah. Okay, so we put Sis into deep storage. We pack up what little belongings we have. You know, the clothes are antiquated, but they'll sell this idea that he is a sophisticated man when we go over to Italy. People will be impressed with his title. But no, we can't bring any of the stuffed birds. We can only fit the empty coffin on top of the car before we drive away from the castle.
Which,
yeah, one
the
of
image.
my signature comedy image, I think, for this movie is him pootling about across the Italian countryside with a coffin on the roof rack of his Oldsmobile.
But this movie also doesn't give a shit about vampire lore because Dracula is in the daylight for most of this movie takes place in the daylight.
Yeah, it turns out that daylight, garlic, crucifixes, all of this is wrong. There's only one thing that is a fatal flaw for Dracula, and that's Joe D'Alessandro's cock.
Yes. Although I do love that he still doesn't like crucifixes, but it's more so as he doesn't like it as decor. He's not like it doesn't hurt him to be around a crucifix.
And we do get a suggestion that garlic is not palatable to him, but it's a throwaway comment when the Marchesa is making a specific soup for him and he just says, no garlic, right? As though, will it upset his digestive system or will it totally fucking kill him? The movie doesn't care to answer.
No, because Morrissey probably forgot the next day when he was writing the next scene.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
Well, he'd probably just retch everywhere. That seems to be his thing.
True.
Yes. A lot of vomiting in this movie.
Yeah. Okay, so we packed up the car. We're driving along the countryside to these jaunty flute score, and then we shift the focus over to a rundown villa as we watch the Di Fiori sisters. So we've got Cytherea, who is played by Dominique Durrell. We've got Rubinia, who is played by Stefania Cassini. And then we've got the youngest sister, Perla, who is played by Silvia Dionisio. And they are out tilling the fields, while oldest sister, the hideously old, disgusting, unmarriable Esmeralda, who is played by Milena Jukovic, and folks, she looks slightly older and slightly less attractive than the others, and they're just like, she's disgusting and garbage. No man would touch her.
She was actually giving me like young Carol Kane vibes, but I will tell you, it took me about 3/4 of the way through the movie to finally like tell some of these girls apart, because I think Pearl and Esmeralda are easier to pick apart, but they're not there very, because we're seeing Rubinia and Cytherea for so much of it. But to describe them, I was like, well, one has long curly red hair with bangs, and that's Rubinia, hence the ruby. And then Cytherea, it would help if she had blue hair, but she has long curly brown hair with bangs.
Yeah, Cytherea is the one who is most likely to be married off, and then Rubinia, I gather, is maybe a little bit younger, but they could almost pass for twins, and it doesn't help that they're constantly fucking each other. So you're just like, which one of these girls is which?
Also, do y'all believe for a second that Perla is 14 years old?
No.
Well, thankfully, no, considering what happens. But
oh, well, yeah, that's true.
I do love the fact that those two sisters, they remind me kind of like the sisters in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So it's sort of an inversion. Instead of the aristocrat going to Dracula's castle and being beset upon by these horny girls, it's Dracula going to the aristocratic villa and being set upon by these bored Catholic girls who get their boobs out while they're tilling the land.
I mean,
as you do.
Every chance they get, their tits are out. But yeah, I like that. It almost, if Dracula didn't die at the end of this movie would almost serve as an origin story for Dracula's brides and not like Dracula himself, which I think that's a really interesting avenue to take that.
Yeah. Like, it took me a while to figure out, these are going to be Dracula's brides, and I almost wish that we could have explored it further. But surprisingly enough, these girls are more the stars of this movie than Dracula is, and I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're the titular blood for Dracula.
Truly, yeah. Just the wrong kind. Spoiled. Unpure blood, because they be fucking.
They are so horny.
So horny. I love it. So they're also being overseen by their mother, who is the Marchesa of this villa. She is played by Maxine McKendry. So basically, we learn very quickly that the family has fallen on hard financial times. That's why the daughters are out tilling the field. They have no servants. The villa is falling into disrepair. So mom is on the hunt to marry these girls off so that we can stave off financial failure, which is why I made the remark that it kind of feels like Pride and Prejudice as well.
But Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pride and Prejudice.
Right. Oh my God.
Terrible.
And with much more sex.
And so much more sex. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a porno parody of Pride and Prejudice somewhere.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
One hopes, right?
To be. Yeah.
So we're out here tilling the fields, and it's very clear very quickly that the two middle daughters/sisters are fairly sexually promiscuous because they do put their tits out, and they're very cavalier about it. But when mom sees them, she says, cover yourselves up. And then we get the introduction of the handyman who works at the house, Mario, who is played by Joe D'Alessandro, and he also orders them to cover up. So immediately the relationships of power are clear. The mom has a certain level of power over the girls, and then strangely enough, the help has a certain amount of power over them.
This character of Mario, he is repugnant.
Oh yeah.
And I guess maybe we'll delve more into this, especially by the end of the film. But do y'all think the film sets him up as the hero of the movie?
Gosh, I hope not. I mean, he does have fantastic hair.
Yeah.
Fantastic hair, fantastic body. I don't think we noted this when we talked about Flesh for Frankenstein, but D'Alessandro is apparently known as a sex symbol, particularly within the queer community. And folks, if you like what you see here and you wish you could see a little bit more of that front bum, you can apparently see him fully naked in Andy Warhol's Flesh from 1968. A casual Google search will show you everything you want to know, because he was also a male model.
Oh. Sorry.
I didn't go looking. Now. Someone else told me about it. Who?
Yeah.
What? Let's move on.
The crew used to call him Thick Dick, apparently.
It's girthy. Yeah. Okay, so let's cut back to the Count. So he is not loving his sojourn into Italy because they have weird vegetables. I love how much the Count is just a whiny bitch in these early scenes.
He's like the world's worst vegan.
I think he's kind of a whiny bitch throughout the entire film, which is why I find it so funny. I mean, Udo Kier is having a blast in this role.
Yeah, if he wasn't starving in real life, this would be a fantastic time for him. It is a great performance. I just don't like what he had to do to go through it. But in terms of finished quality, this is such a weird kind of off-kilter performance for him.
Even weirder than the movie we saw him in.
What movie is that?
It's called House of Boys, where he plays the... No, that's the thing, is we thought it was going to be a riot, and it turns out it's actually a very sad film about AIDS, but he plays the kind of madame in a sex club.
Oh,
yes.
I mean, I guess we didn't mention this, but in case you didn't know, everyone, Udo Kier is an openly gay actor.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And he looks marvelous in drag, looking like Madonna.
It's true. Okay, so Anton negotiates a room at the inn, and he is not at all subtle about the fact that they are looking for a virginal wife. Emphasis on the virgin. Mm-hmm. So this prompts a townsperson who is played by Gil Cagney to mention, hey, you should check base with the Di Fiore family because they have 4 marriageable daughters. You should absolutely go and check out their villa. And Anton's like, cool, that sounds great. He relays this back to the Count, who has crashed in the room. But of course, he is too dissatisfied with the decor. So as you mentioned, Trace, he does take down that cross very quickly. And he's not at all quiet about saying, this room is terrible.
He's such a diva.
He's also really upset with the amount of oil they put on their lettuce. So he is... just so upset that he just is going to have to eat Romanian lettuce with lemon juice. Oil! They put so much oil on everything!
Actual dialogue from the film. Folks, if you're sitting here watching this and thinking, what am I watching right now? welcome to the show.
My favorite is in that exchange where they're talking about, what eligible Italian families are nearby with daughters that we can prey upon.
Yeah.
At one point, somebody says, "Oh yeah, I'm sure this family's a good pick. They're very religious and keep their daughters virgins." And I think it's the lady that runs the tavern. She says, "The oldest one she didn't marry. She's a real tramp."
Yeah. I mean, I said that it's the 70s and it feels like we have a certain level of like a sexual promiscuity to the proceedings. But oh boy, are we suggesting that any woman is a tramp, a slut, a whore, we're slapping them in the face, we're raping. It's just like, okay.
But this feels like it's maybe not but it's making fun of it. Because again, like given how sexually liberated everyone involved with the factory was, like this feels like a pointed joke at sexual conservatism.
I think so. It's just at times, if you forget it, it feels like a weirdly misogynistic film.
Yeah, no, I don't even disagree with you there.
It's both, right? It's both at the same time, strangely enough.
Well, it's like they're trying to be funny with misogyny.
Yeah.
So your mileage may vary.
Your mileage may vary, yeah.
I think it's trying to suggest that women are disgusting, isn't it? I mean, it seems that way. Just promiscuous and disgusting, certainly in the way that Dracula reacts to them.
Well, and also a little bit nefarious or duplicitous because, again, they constantly lie to Dracula about being virgins.
Very true.
Well, it's interesting. Let me bring Murphy back into this because he has an intriguing read on how Morrissey approaches some of this material. So he says, unlike Warhol, Morrissey evokes pathos for his decadent characters and ambivalently questions the cultures in which they thrive and decline. Morrissey's films thus repeatedly dramatize the decline of a coherent social and moral order as his characters, questing for full expression of their individualistic egos, succumb to unimpeded indulgence. So, like Murphy's read on this entire film, and by extension on a lot of Morrissey's films, is that they have been given too long a leash to indulge in their fantasies and their whims, right? But I think it's interesting because I do ultimately read this as the film siding with Dracula. Like we should have allowed his romanticism. We should not be permitting girls to be sexually promiscuous because look at what happens. The old dynasties die out and then we're just left with rapey farmhands inheriting the villa.
I know. I was about to say, well, yeah, no, I think it's saying that they should be promiscuous because then they won't fall into the spell of Dracula. But then it's like, oh, but the film does kind of use that in its rape scene at the end of the film, so maybe not.
Yeah, you get raped by a communist.
Well,
I mean, I think you would be forgiven for walking away from the film saying, what is this movie's politics and what is the actual message? Because in some ways it seems to be both condoning and also saying, well, this is what life is. Like, people are going to do this kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure anybody comes out of this looking great.
No, I don't think so. Except maybe Esmeralda.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about her because I wanted more of her.
Oh, truly. Yeah. Okay, so in the morning, we've got the Marchesa informing her husband, Richard, who I didn't know this until I started researching. He is played by Vittorio De Sica, who is an Italian neo-realist director. He's the Oscar winner for The Bicycle Thief. So this is like a surprising cameo, but of course, if you don't know Italian cinema, you may not recognize him. But this was like a big get.
Yeah, he got an Oscar nomination for his role in the 30s, maybe it was the 50s version of A Farewell to Arms.
Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of monolithic in Italian post-war neo-realist movie making.
I think it's one of those things where I just don't always recognize people, particularly directors. And
right.
Yes, I'm going to out myself as a bias. I tend to recognize famous Americans because I see pictures of them frequently, but, older directors from Italy, I know the name. If you tell me, oh, it's the director of The Bicycle Thief, I'm going to say, cool, okay, wow, yeah, I remember that film from film school.
Interesting. Yeah. Did you recognize Roman Polanski's cameo in this movie?
So truthfully, I didn't. I know what Polanski looks like too, but I didn't recognize that it was him until I read it and then thought back like, okay, so which of the guys? Oh, he's that guy. Okay, cool.
Yeah. This is Vittorio De Sica's last film as well, isn't it?
Oh, damn.
Oh.
Yeah, he died shortly after.
I was going to say, I wonder if that impacted this, because this character of Richard shows up in the early parts of the film, and he seems to be a bit of a buffoon, right? Like, he doesn't really understand his wife's pressing need to marry these girls off and solidify the family fortune. He just kind of wants to speak, and she's like, dude, shut up. But then he disappears in the back half of the film. Like, when everything is going down at this villa, he's nowhere to be seen.
Well, so this is the thing. So whenever Morrissey and Bromsberg and Ponti were all meeting, basically after they all agreed to do this, Ponti goes to Morrissey, oh, hey, but Vittorio De Sica wants a part in the film. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like, that was it.
I wonder if it was like, he's available on this day, and we shot scenes with him, and then Morrissey realized, oh, I guess I'm not going to write any further scenes for him.
Honestly, I'm fine with that, though, and like, no shade to him, but I just prefer watching Maxine McKendry's Marquesa. Like, I think she is the much more interesting parent between the two.
I almost just wish that she had been the only parent. Like, let's go full Elizabethan costume drama and say, we have no man of the house, and we're about to lose this villa because we are women.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It's fine. He is kind of fun when he's here, and then when he's not, you don't entirely miss him.
Yeah, which is kind of like Roman Polanski's scene. You could cut it out. It's not essential to the plot at all.
I think it's only in there because Roman Polanski was there for the day.
Yeah, our friend is here. Let's put him on the film.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, as I said, Richard is pretty confident everything's going to work out, and his wife is like, shut the fuck up. We're inviting this guy over. We're going to marry off one of these daughters, because if not, we're going to ruin.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
So Anton shows up for a visit so he can make his pitch. Richard tries to insist that the girls are children. It's like his opening line. And his wife just steamrolls him and is like, how about you and the Count move in immediately? We would be happy to host you.
I love this. Like, but I guess I can't believe I didn't think about the Pride and Prejudice comparisons, but that really is what this is.
I think I thought of it because the costuming, like you mentioned, Trace, this is technically set in the 20s. They don't really make a big deal of that, but the costumes to me look so Elizabethan that I just thought, oh, okay, this is feeling very Victorian to me.
Yeah. And I guess to be clear, there isn't really a Mr. Darcy figure here, or like whatever, but it's very
unless
much
Mario's supposed to be it.
Maybe, but yeah, very much the mother trying to like whore out her 4 daughters. Like, that's Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. Okay, so back at the inn, Anton does zero in on this young girl who is clearly underage, and everyone is super creeped out by Anton. I love that everywhere he goes, people notice that there's something not quite right about him. He's not just Renfield level creepy, he is like child predator creepy.
But we also don't really know anything about him except that he is just obsessed with Dracula.
Yes, yeah, and obviously, folks, we have made queer connections with a Renfield character and their intentions towards protecting and serving a Dracula figure. But obviously, the most obvious queer reading for this movie is the fact that we've got incestuous lesbian sisters.
Maybe
not lesbian, maybe even just like pansexual or bisexual, because they seem to just enjoy sex.
Okay, here's the thing. 'Cause I wasn't even gonna say incestuous with this, though. It just seems like they're very comfortable fucking people in front of each other.
Trace, they're fully making out in multiple scenes.
Well, but you know, it's like, 1920s Italian, like, close sibling bond. I don't know.
Trace, what are you saying right now?
They kind of look sort of jaded and listless and bored, though, don't they?
Yes.
That scene where Joe's like grinding away on top of one of the sisters and the other one's just sat there in a chair, heavy-lidded, eating strawberries. They just look really like... been there, done that.
That's the thing. Joe doesn't.
They do this every day. It's like, oh God, how do we separate Monday from Tuesday when we just got this guy over here plowing us boringly?
That's the thing. Like Mario does not look like a very good lover. I think that makes me even like
terrible.
It makes me even angrier that like he doesn't get a comeuppance at all by the movie's end.
Truly. In some ways, it's satisfying because we so look at him as a villain, even though the film maybe doesn't share our thoughts about that. But yeah, all of these sex scenes, all of his interactions with the sisters, you're just like, oh, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're still with Anton, so let's talk about this weird... I don't know why this scene is in here apart from the Roman Polanski cameo, but we end up playing a game that's tantamount to Simon Says, and we nearly start a fight with Roman Polanski and Anton, but then, oopsie, that girl we were checking out got hit by a car. She's bleeding to death in the street. We don't see any of this. We just cut to Anton delivering a blood-soaked piece of bread that Dracula eats, and it's so refreshing.
Okay, I didn't find much of this movie very erotic, but him eating or sucking the blood out of this bread, I found deeply sexy.
Yeah. Oh. You got to be comfortable with the fluids dripping down the face, but if that is your jam, this movie will get you off multiple times.
I guess also maybe it's because it's like, I've never seen something like that before. Like bread as a blood vessel.
There's something kind of novel to it.
Yeah.
Sick version of French toast.
Ooh. No, this is Italian.
Italian toast.
Italian toast.
Yes.
Okay, so Richard and his wife, the Marquesa, more or less lay out how things are going to go for their daughters over breakfast. She cuts him off so that we can just get to the chase because he's too long-winded and nobody could care. And then we go directly from the sisters talking here in either the kitchen or the living room. And we go directly to the bedroom where they're more or less fretting about how ugly the Count is going to be and how they're not really sure that they want to marry him. But I did love that stylistic choice because it's not jarring. But when you realize, oh, we've just completely switched locations, I don't know. It struck me as stylistic and I liked it.
Are you sure it was, or could it have been a mistake?
It could have been that as well.
It could have been.
Yes.
Because the rest of the film isn't particularly finessed. I mean, the opening scenes where there were lots of sort of long takes with zooms during dialogue, I thought, oh my, this really is bad. But then later on, there are some flourishes, and I thought, is this on purpose, or did you just do it on accident that day?
Yes?
Yeah, it's a yes to everything.
Happy accidents? Oops, yeah. I stumbled into something that looks good.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is on par for Flesh for Frankenstein. So, Conrad, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts if you ever do check that out in comparison to this.
I'm definitely tempted to.
Yeah, it is a recommend. Like, that movie is wacky in different ways.
Yeah, it's. I think Blood for Dracula is funnier, but I do think that Flesh for Frankenstein is probably the better movie.
Yeah. Okay, so then, yes, we reveal that Mario is fucking both of these sisters. We do get to watch him fuck them both. The sex looks very unexciting. And it's strange because in some ways this is a bit pornographic, as you mentioned, Conrad. Like, we're definitely seeing tons of ass. We're seeing full bush from these girls at different points in the film. Mm-hmm. And yet when we see the sex, like the sex throughout the entire film is completely unconvincing because it is like crotch to stomach.
Oh, yes, it's full The Room. It's The Room, right?
Mm-hmm. Like he's fucking her belly button every time.
Okay, but everyone, if you're listening and you have not watched this movie, this is the line of dialogue that Mario says to these two women.
Oh, God.
I'm tired of you two tramps. What about your sister? What does she do all night? I'd like to rape the hell out of her.
But then he does clarify that he would treat her right.
Oh, yeah, because when they say, well, she's only 14, his reply is, I'd treat her real sweet. She'd like that, I bet. Like, what?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's this line that immediately cues you, oh, this guy is the secret villain of this movie.
And here's the thing. I laughed when I heard this line of dialogue. And I'm not laughing because of his desire to rape the youngest sister of this group. It's just the nonchalant, cavalier way with which he just says this, and no one bats an eye.
No one reacts.
No.
Like, if somebody said, I'd like to rape that person, and that's not even like a new phenomenon where you would say, what the fuck is wrong with you?
No, their only issue is that she's 14.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, I guess if she was of age, I'd be totally down with that. What? My notes are just, what?
But what was the legal age for marriage in Italy in the 1920s?
Maybe 16? I feel like, you know what, we should reach out to Sheila. She would know this. She's the Italian film expert. Okay, so the next day, the Count and Anton arrive at the Di Fiore residence, and the sisters are still very interested about, okay, how old is he? What is he going to be like in bed? Because I'm not marrying him unless I know for sure, which to me is kind of, that's a bit progressive. Like, don't move in with somebody unless you know you can live with them, and definitely don't marry them unless you know that you have some good sexual compatibility. I'm sorry, I just think it's smart.
Well, I mean, Dracula just needs virgin blood. He didn't need anything else.
I mean, little do these girls know that they are not going back to Romania. That is not what he's interested in. Okay, so then we do have Mario and Anton bickering about the distinction between workers and servants. Principally, this is in regard to moving the coffin into the chapel, because, of course, this is where Dracula needs to sleep, and he's very tired all the time. But this is also part of this proletariat versus aristocracy conversation the film wants to engage in. Like, what is the power of Marxism? Because that is what Mario represents.
Well, okay. We can save it for the end to see. I'm just curious, because maybe, yeah, if that is what he represents, then maybe the film is more of a condemnation of him, but it's just like, oh, but he's winning? I don't know.
Yeah, I would argue that the film is suggesting it's not a good thing that you empower the proletariat because, like, I don't know, I think the film is siding with the old school, like, the rich are rich for a reason, and they've got this land for a reason, and shouldn't they deserve to keep up their traditions of nobility and so on? Like, it's just a very odd message, especially now in 2024.
Well, but again, we keep saying message, and maybe I'm just being dense here, but, like, do we think there's an actual message to this movie? Or given the way this was filmed, is it just more of a, again, let's just write, we feel like writing today?
Yeah, it could well be. I mean, on the one hand, the music and the centrality of the Dracula character are certainly, he's the one whose mission you're set out on, you're invested in at the very beginning. It seems to suggest that this is positioned as a tragedy for this poor guy who's never really seen as a predator in the sense that Dracula usually is. He just seems more like a desperate addict who's on the wane. And
if only these tramps would stop lying to him, he would just take virgin blood and then be done with it.
You think he'd have, like, the ability to sniff out virgin blood or something, but no, we don't have that here.
No, there'd be no plot then. There'd be no movie. Okay, so yes, we have this conversation. Clearly, Mario and Anton are not going to get along. This will continue. Nobody actually gets along with Mario unless you are female identifying, and then he just wants to fuck you.
Grind, 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 fall asleep.
Yeah, speaking of, this is when Safiria visits Mario in his, I'm going to say shack. It's an interesting place. It's very clearly on the land that the Di Fioris own, but, like, he's got his own kitchen and everything, so it's, I guess, his own space. But this is clearly also where they go to fuck him. So we are having sex, but she's still complaining about the Count's looks.
But this also kind of starts like a rape scene, right? Because she's saying no at first, and then it becomes yes.
No, it's a rape scene. Because she says no repeatedly, and then he forces her, and then, yeah, she does the usual thing where, oh, suddenly now she likes it.
Which is, again, such weird... It's such a weird... Because this will happen with the other rape scene later, too, which is just like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, throughout the 70s and 80s, men were taught through film that if you just persisted, women will eventually A, give in, B, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
that's why I'm saying we should only refer to this as a rape scene.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, she does end this by saying that she loves him, and then that's, of course, when he kicks her out, further proof that he's a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So she does her walk of shame back to the villa, and then when she complains to her mom, the Marquesa just reiterates, hey, keep your priorities focused on this Count. I don't want to hear any complaints because we need money. So mom says, I don't really care about my daughters. Like, I care about their future, but the most important thing is one of you needs to fucking close this deal.
Which, again, it's only the middle two sisters, because one's too old and she's a hag, and the one's too young, so...
Yep, that is
not
case.
too young. I just looked it up. The age of consent in Italy is 14.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, didn't we go through all of this whenever we were having all this, the discourse around Call Me By Your Name?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Count is growing weaker. We see him in his wheelchair. He's sweating. He insists to Anton it has to happen tonight. So when Safiria brings him food, this is when he starts to turn on, I'm not going to say the charm, but the level of questioning intensifies. And he begins to touch her all over her body and says, did anyone ever touch you here? Or here, or here. Interesting that we don't see much of any of this. So the way that this is shot, the framing is such that her body is actually blocking all the places that he's touching, which is an interesting, I guess, contrast to the way that we see Mario just like full on sexually assaulting these girls every time.
Yeah.
Which again, I think that to me is the subtle coded messaging that we're supposed to align with Dracula. So he's really just saying, are you a good fit for me? And Mario is garbage because look at what he's doing to the girls.
Yeah.
So ultimately he decides, okay, I'm going to risk it. He bites her. He attacks the neck. This goes on forever.
But it's because okay, so much like how in this the sex scene from earlier where it's like, oh, he's just like fucking her belly button a la The Room. He is moving all over the front of her neck. Like we see later that she will have two distinct bite marks on her neck, but the way he is doing this, it's like it doesn't look like he's making contact with her neck, and he's just like mouthing all over the front of her face.
Yeah, if you told me he didn't have teeth and he was trying to gum her throat to death, I would believe you.
But I just thought he was trying to trick her, right? To be like, oh, well, I really don't care if you're a virgin. I just want you to be beautiful, and that's all I care about. But she holds true. She's like, no, I swear, I'm a virgin.
Yeah, so he gets a bunch of blood into him, and for a moment it seems great. I do enjoy the creative decision to then shine a green light on his face. I wish we did it again when he bites Rabinia, but we only do it the one time. But yeah, he has to run into the bathroom so that he can violently puke all of this blood back up into the frankly gorgeous looking tub.
Oh, everything about this house looks...
The bathroom porn is great.
Well, because the furniture is so shabby, as we've heard from the Marquesa. But yeah, this vomiting scene goes on for a long time.
Yes, yeah.
It does. Does it go on for longer than the necking scene? It feels like it.
It feels like it does. Like
they're comparable, yeah.
I don't, because Udo Kier would not say how they did the vomiting scene for this. He said there was some trickery here, but I'm not going to tell you how we did it. And I was like, well, that's not fair. You're on a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does begin a cycle of Dracula necking people and then retching in Art Deco bathrooms.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were going to do a drinking game with this film, you could do it every time he has to throw up blood. You're going to have at least 2 strong drinks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring in Morris Yakowar's Criterion essay when he discusses this scene. So he says, Dracula's toilet agonies are laughable, but we are touched when we remember that they are the death throes of a dashing figure who cannot survive in a world without purity. In this corrupt world, sex means death to the romantic hero.
It is pathetic. It is quite sad.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the reason why it almost vacillates in this moment where it's super laughable. Udo Kier is really selling how agonizing this is. And then we just keep at it and you think, oh gosh, how long is this poor dude going to have to go through it? He's in agony. Aw. All right, so we cut to Mario and Rabinia getting tired of waiting. So they're waiting for Safiria because they do the threesome sex. And so they just decide they're going to get started without her. Then they briefly pause so that they can discuss the aristocracy again.
Well, because he's just like spouting pro-socialism ideals. And I was like, okay, sure, yeah. Mario. Like, he's really concerned with politics for being just like a manservant or like a handyman.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? He tries to convince them that it would be a bad thing for them to marry this dude and continue sort of, I guess, the traditions of rich people marrying into rich families, because he's very clear that eventually it's going to catch up with them and they're probably going to get executed, which, of course, foreshadows exactly what does ultimately happen.
Yeah, it does give us the deathless line, though, that Count Dracula is no good for anyone and he never was.
That good for nothing Dracula. So she doesn't take very kindly to this because I think you're right, Trey. She's a bit tired of it. So she advises him that he should find a nice farm girl, and then she's just right back on top of him. So clearly this is just part of the routine. It's what we do.
Yeah. It's a Thursday.
I mean, yeah, they're bored. They're rich and bored, but they're not rich because they have no money.
Yeah, they're getting poorer and they're still bored. So in the morning, the mom discovers the Count knows all about Safiria. So the truth comes out. Your daughter is not a virgin. And she looks very sickly. So she retires to the bed. We won't see much more of Safiria except for like sporadic bride-related scenes.
Yeah, she's just kind of like acting like very like somnambulistic throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah, but in the kitchen, the Count does notice how well read Esmeralda is because, of course, she has no romantic prospects, so what else is she going to do but a sad spinster who reads and knows how to cook?
Well, she's filled with virgin blood.
Yeah,
she just needs a cat.
I mean, honestly, I feel like, well, because Esmeralda and Perla are the most underserved by this screenplay. Like, I don't think the characterization of, well, no, I know, because Rabinia and Safiria really do get a lot more to work with or on screenplay-wise. But, like, Perla, I'll give you $1 to tell me anything about her.
She's 14, and that's all we got.
There you go. I will send you that $1. But yeah, it feels like a missed opportunity that we don't utilize them more. And maybe it's a case where it's like, well, 4 daughters is too many, but still.
But I think we kind of need it, because initially I was going to say, well, maybe we just have one sexually active daughter in the middle, but I do think it plays well getting to see the repeated attempts to question them, like, and even their interplay between them is interesting. So yeah, like if I was going to cut one, I would almost say Perla, but obviously we need that for the narrative crux at the end of the film.
Well, but we need Perla just so she can be raped at the end of the film.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. They are kind of the same character because both of them are the party poopers that keep ratting out their sisters.
Yeah. All right, so the Count decides he's going to try to press Mario about the girl's sexual history, but this just ends up in them yelling at each other about class and social manifestos and so on. And the Count tries to prove that he is still as virile and manly as this handyman, but he barely makes it up the stairs before he collapses and he's bleeding and so on.
There is never a point in this film where Dracula is actually threatening. This is the most castrated Dracula I have ever seen on screen, because every time he tries to get a little bit angry, he just starts gagging and retching and vomiting again, or he just passes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of delightful just because it feels so different from every other depiction we see.
Mm-hmm.
And he's aligned with the aristocracy, of course, so if there is an underlying theme, then he's probably our best representation of it.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so back in Mario's cottage later, this is when Rubinia is there solo. She is not happy with the Count. She's not warming up to him, but she is also concerned about her sister. And this, to me, is the most uncomfortable rape scene because it does look more realistic. Like, so to get her to shut up, he essentially forces her head down so that she will fellate him.
Yeah, so because she tells him that Dracula only wants to marry virgins, and he's like, well, so what's he doing with you two whores? And then, of course, you pig, you bitch, slap, 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 and then the head pushing goes.
Which is so confronting because then we just cut to her standing very proudly, very nakedly in the bath, telling Perla about her strategy for being sexually active, how to land a man, and I think if you just isolated this one scene, it would seem incredibly progressive because she's like, oh, I'm just going to go out there and fuck anybody I want. All I have to do is clean up afterwards. If I smell fresh, then there's no problem.
But it's coming like right on the heels of this rape scene. And I wonder, I mean, maybe going too deep with this, but I wonder if it's trying to make in the 1920s Italy, this is just like what the gender dynamics were. So because none of the women are fazed by their rape scenes after the fact. Like they seem to get over it immediately. And I just wonder if it's something about what the film is trying to actually, I don't know. I don't think the film is trying to do anything with these, but it just feels very uncomfortable to see them completely unfazed by these sexual assaults.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can really enjoy sexual liberation when you're just being taken advantage of.
But she thinks she's sexually liberated.
She might do. She might think that's what sex is.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Where it's like at the time, this was maybe just common for them. So they thought, this is just a part of daily life.
Yeah, it could well be. Although this is Europe, so you wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think there's the reading within the film and the way that she's reacting and how she doesn't seem fazed by the rape and how we can infer that's commenting on culture and so on. But then there's also, you pull it back and you say, okay, or is this just Morrissey writing the script day to day, afternoon to afternoon, and not taking the proper care to really flesh out the impact of what this might be doing to his female characters? Like, I don't want to necessarily cry misogyny, but I do feel like we're probably going to have female listeners who say, fuck this dude and kind of fuck this movie.
Well, because it also kind of feels like it's here for shock value.
A little bit.
And that is not
good.
It's not great. It's not great. I mean, again, because I feel like whenever there's a sexual assault scene in a film, it gets very much interrogating. Like, why is this here? Is this necessary to have this here? I don't know.
I don't get the impression that Morrissey actively thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to Perla's rape, I mean, I guess you could argue, yes, there is a plot reason for that to happen. I mean, a horrible reason for it to happen, but it is relevant to the plot, whereas these two, it's kind of like, maybe it's informing the characters of Rubinia and Safiria just to show how they interact with men, or specifically Mario, but...
Or is it setting up a precedent in terms of character behavior? Like, that way, when he does rape Perla, we say, oh, of course he fucking does, because he does this to every woman.
Yeah, but isn't that supposed to be a noble act?
Well,
I think it is.
He thinks it's a noble act, but does the film think it's a noble act? See, and that's where I want to give the film and Morrissey the benefit of the doubt, but I don't. Like, I remember the first time I saw this, because I saw this like 5-ish years ago, and I just remember it ended, and I was like, are we supposed to think the rapist is the hero of this movie? Does the film think the rapist is the hero of this movie? I
think it does.
I think it does. Yeah,
which is what makes it so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So let's come back to Rubinia and the Count. So much like her sister, she is effectively lured into his room. So, she's presented as the flightiest, sort of most, I guess, financially driven. She's very shallow in that regard because she wants to know about the size of the room and is she going to have pretty clothes and that kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's great. Are you a fucking virgin? Because I need to bite you.
And she's like, yeah.
I'm sick of retching in bathrooms.
Yeah. So it doesn't even really come to that because she realizes he doesn't cast a reflection. So she tries to flee. So he just decides to bite her after the fact. And of course, the result is exactly the same as what we saw with her sister.
And this is where we get the iconic line, "The blood of these whores is killing me."
Yes. So my gaydar perked up at this because I could not help but wonder if Mike White, the creator of the White Lotus series, obviously Jennifer Coolidge's iconic line from season 2 where she goes, "These gays are trying to kill me," and it becomes memeified and so on. I mean, is it maybe a reach? Possibly, but Mike White seems very media literate. It seems entirely possible that he might be aware of this line because it struck me as so fucking similar. And we're talking about class relations here, right?
Yeah.
Because the White Lotus is all about, especially Jennifer Coolidge's character. She's new money. She doesn't really understand how to interact with rich people. So the fact that similar characters in similar texts are having almost identical lines,
and it's in Europe in that second season too. So actually, it's in Italy in the second season. Oh, oh, you know what? I'm inclined to say no. I don't think that was an intentional thing, but the more I think about it. The more I'm like, maybe. I mean, it's not even the same joke, but like it is similar enough.
Yeah. Mike White, if
Let
you're
us
listening,
know.
reach out. You're not listening, but it's
if
fine.
there had been an Udo Kier cameo, maybe.
Right.
Future casting for future seasons.
If it was him instead of Tom Hollander in that evil gay role in White Lotus, then that would be a more like, okay, this has to be doing Blood for Dracula.
That would have been very fun.
He would have been perfect for it.
Right.
He would have been, yeah. All right, so later in the kitchen, we've got Anton revealing that neither of these tramps are marriageable material. And so this is the moment where he seemingly breaks the fourth wall because he does turn directly to the camera when he asks, "How old is Perla?"
Okay. I guess I didn't clock this because I thought he's meant to be talking to the Marquesa, right?
Yes, he is.
Okay, but but that's the thing, right? Because we don't have any other shots really of people looking directly into the camera. So this could be an intentional fourth wall break, like wink wink thing, or it could just be we didn't have the camera positioned in the right place when we shot this day.
Or the actor looked into the lens.
Yeah, and we didn't have time to reshoot it.
This character is just so over the top and all of his line deliveries are ridiculous. So when this happened, I thought, oh my God, are they acknowledging how sublime this performance is? Because even this, it seems like he might as well have just winked and said like, well, how old is she?
Yeah, it does get pretty close to Tim Curry in Clue, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now.
All right, so Perla does mention to Mario that both of her older sisters are sick, and the two start to compare notes. Something's not quite right here with the Count. This is while he is chopping wood shirtless, by the way.
Of course.
And he also naturally uses this opportunity to put the moves on her, asking why she hasn't come to visit him in his cottage. And she rebuffs him. She's not interested in that at all. So then we get another, I would say this is the other very stylish shot in the film, is when we've got the camera that is affixed to the wheelchair that the Count is moving around in. So we get to watch him in close up as he wheels through the house before eventually reconnecting with Esmeralda, and we have a little conversation.
Is there a name for this type of shot? I was Googling like shot in movies with camera fixed to front of actor, and I wasn't pulling up like but there has to be a name for this, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard of one. It became very popular for a while, didn't it? Once cameras became light enough to strap directly to your actor.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there's a technical term, and it's just not common to lay people.
Yeah, it's a thing though where honestly, every time the more I see it now, the more I'm kind of like, oh, I'm so tired of these kind. I get the effect that it has, the intended effect it's meant to have, but it's just like, ugh, it's so jarring. Again, by design, but still,
I don't mind it. I think if it's used well, like I'm thinking of Upgrade, where the camera is like totally affixed and it's right in the middle of the action, then it really works for me. But yeah, sometimes it just seems a little like we're doing this because it looks fun.
Well, I think it does work better for me now in action scenes because I feel like I see it less in action scenes, but it's usually like, oh, is the character having like a nervous breakdown or are they stressing out really bad? And
they're high. Yeah.
Or they're, yes, exactly. And it's very much a visual way to get you in that mindset. And I just think I've seen it so much now that I'm like, okay, well now it's just cliche by this point.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, not by this point in this film, but by 2024 it is.
Okay, so the most important part of this scene is not just the fact that they make this connection, but also, for some reason, the Count just naturally assumes that she can't be a virgin because she was engaged to be married once upon a time, and it was for a lengthy period, so she was engaged for 17 months, so he just defaults, goes, oh, well, you must be a tramp.
Which I wanted to be like, but she says it didn't work out. Why do you think it didn't work out? Because she wasn't putting out.
She's too busy reading.
Well, it's frustrating because he's interrogating the other sisters to such a degree. And here he just kind of goes, oh, you were engaged? Never mind.
Which she doesn't even look, I mean, I know we commented on this, but she doesn't look that much older than the rest of them.
What are you talking about? She's 80.
She's a hag.
Haggard. It's hilarious. It's like the old age equivalent of like glasses and ponytail in a YA film.
She's 22. Oh no.
All right, so we move to the chapel because Mario is now very, very suspicious. So he does pry open the empty coffin. The big reveal, of course, there's nothing in there. We've been told that it's the Count's dead relative, and naturally, we just know as an audience that's where he's been sleeping.
And we should point out, by the way, that from this point on, I want to say the film goes off the rails, but it gets wild from this point on in both good and bad ways.
Yeah, it kind of feels like in the car that morning, he was just thinking, let's just wrap this up.
Yeah.
I want to go home.
Yeah, like, I guess we should probably introduce some action or something. Like, something should happen at this point in the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've been filming 2 films back to back. The $300,000 is gone.
And so what do we need? Another rape scene.
Oh my God, yes. But this time it's the sisters raping their younger sister to verify her virginity. So this time the Count isn't even asking Perla. He just sends his vampire brides to go and check. And they, of course, confirm, yes, Perla is intact. So they're going to take her to Dracula. But unlike her sluttier sisters, Perla is having none of this. She manages to escape. But tragically, she runs right into Mario, who announces that the Count is a vampire or a pervert from the Middle Ages.
Like, okay, so he corners her up against a wall and just goes to town on her. And it's like, it's so frustrating because he really views this as him saving her. So this is such a weird, uncomfortable rape scene. Obviously all rape scenes are uncomfortable, but just the reasoning behind it and the reason that the rapist is doing this,
yeah, I'm not even sure. I think it is supposed to be noble, isn't it? But it's weird because the way that he behaves towards the rest of the family kind of mirrors his attitude towards them and their social class, which is he just views them with contempt and uses them and humiliates them. Is that what he's doing here? Or does he actually think he's saving this innocent?
I think he does. Like, I don't detect a lot of contempt. Like, he seems hell-bent on protecting her against this evil creature that he has uncovered.
And his exact line of dialogue before he actually starts raping her is, you should lose that virginity of yours before he gets to you. So, but again, like, is that really, is he just saying that for her to like make her more inclined to want to have sex with him? Or is he doing that to justify his own actions?
Well, and this would all play better if he hadn't already made a move on her and she had rebuffed him.
Right.
Because it does smack a bit of opportunistic rape.
But then the question we kind of asked earlier, and we did ask earlier that we didn't really answer, but again, do we think the film views this as a noble act?
I think it does, doesn't it? Because then he goes on to be the slayer, which we'll get to in a moment. So, yeah, I think our Marxist rapist is the hero.
I keep trying to, I keep pulling in the whole like depiction versus endorsement thing where it's like, well, we can have a bad guy win, quote unquote, the end of the film, and it doesn't necessarily mean the film is saying that's a good thing. So I can't, again, I'm just trying to believe that people wouldn't be this horrible. Be like, he's the hero, look what he did.
But it does have that vein of exploitation to it, right? Like, it feels a little seedy, a little pornographic.
Yeah.
Some of this feels like it's there for shock treatment. So I wouldn't be surprised if it said, hey, wouldn't it be weird and a little bit novel if we made our protagonist or the hero of the film eventually to be this Marxist handy person who is also going to rape someone to save them.
Yeah, he rapes all of these daughters except for Esmeralda.
Yeah, because she's a hag.
Just a hag. She's all dried up down there.
I mean, the other weird thing is, I feel like we just keep going back and forth because it ultimately isn't clear. Because even when the Marquesa catches him raping her youngest daughter, she's more incensed by this idea that it's not, like, it's just not proper behavior. Well, like, oh, well, this isn't going to look good. It's not like, oh my God, my daughter.
Well, because I also think maybe she's still holding on to hope that maybe once Perla becomes of age, like the Count can marry her, and this is ruining that chance for her.
I mean, to give the Marquesa a benefit of a doubt, because she doesn't actually know that the Count is bad. She still thinks that he is just there to marry a daughter. So it's not until Mario takes both of them up and we see, yes, the other two sisters canoodling. Oh, look at them, what he's done to them. To which I said, they're actually just behaving the way they normally do. So
it's like an average evening for these two.
But to piggyback onto like her reaction though, so again, the Marquesa's line of dialogue when she walks in on her daughter being raped, "You're just an employee. How dare you put my daughter in such an unfortunate position?" Oh my God.
Yeah. And you kind of have to laugh because it's so utterly ridiculous.
And that's the thing. Like, I found myself laughing because what the fuck are we doing here? But again, it's like, then I caught myself because I was like, oh, wait, like I'm watching a rape scene being interrupted.
Yeah, it's dark comedy.
Well, it is, yeah, because it's just taking the scene from Pride and Prejudice to the extreme, because all they're worried about is you're spoiling the goods. You know, this is a saleable commodity, this daughter. And you, a working class person, are just ruining the goods by smudging them with your hands.
Well, so maybe it's meant to be kind of like not a heightened version of that kind of like, viewing women and daughters specifically as commodities to sell off to men for like better marriages. Again, if I'm being generous, I don't know.
Well, because we're treating virginity the same way, right? Like, obviously, it's a narrative construct that the Count can only drink virgin blood, but it's kind of that, I don't know, it has that religious element to it as well, right? Like, you know, it's important to save yourself for marriage because that's how God would want it, and so on. So, like, in some ways, it does feel like we're playing a lot with some conventional ideas.
Yeah.
So the Count has been exposed as a nefarious person. So Mom decides, okay, I'm going to get a gun. We're going to deal with this. And Anton, meanwhile, has decided, okay, we need to take care of business. I need to protect the Count. So we do have a mom versus servant face-off in which she gets stabbed and then she blows him away.
Do we see her again? I think we're supposed to believe that she just dies from the stab.
She just dies here. Yeah.
Oh, see, that's a bummer. But we have also like Mario is chasing Dracula through the house with an axe, and I do love like he runs into a door, but his cape gets stuck in the door, and that's how Mario knows to go follow him.
I had it in my notes. Damn cape!
Should have watched The Incredibles.
Exactly. Yeah, we know capes are completely impractical.
But they look great when you're trying to flee down a hallway, right?
Yeah.
So in the most sublimely silly and entertaining fashion, Mario eventually catches up with the Count multiple times and proceeds to hack off a limb each time.
It's hilarious.
Well, because this movie isn't particularly gory, and then we just go full Grand Guignol for this like last 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm curious, Conrad, doesn't this feel a little bit like a Black Knight Monty Python situation?
Yeah, it does. That was exactly the thing that I thought of when I was watching. I was waiting for him to shout, "It's just a flesh wound," because he's reduced to a wiggling torso that just gets staked. It's terrible.
This thing, like, Dracula is never legitimately threatening for one moment in this film.
No, because even these moments, right? Like, he is fleeing in panic because he knows he cannot compete with the axe and obviously, this robust figure of a man.
Yeah, and I think you missed it, but that moment when... Is it the mother that walks in on him when he's licking the virginal blood from the floor?
Oh, no, it's Esmeralda.
Oh, Esmeralda.
That's when she gets turned off screen as she discovers, oh, okay, he's drinking blood. Interesting. I'm going to stick around.
I can't believe we didn't mention that. Yeah, because like that is a striking image. Like, also, there's so much blood left on the ground.
Yeah, which is nice. Quite uncomfortable when you realize, oh, that's the byproduct of the rape.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it reminded me of the character Jesus in Guillermo del Toro's film Kronos. It's sort of this guy really reduced to just licking up leftovers on the floor because he's so desperate to feed his need. It's tragic.
Yeah.
So the count is basically just a middle section and a head, and we're about to stake him. And this is when Esmeralda runs up and pleads that she will just take him away so that they can die together. And of course, Mario has no fucking idea what she's talking about. So we stake him. She screams. Great scream, by the way.
Oh, I could have taken a longer version of this scene, just to give Esmeralda more to do.
Yeah, because, I mean, we all understand immediately that Esmeralda has already been turned. I mean, she's conveniently wearing a scarf around her neck.
Yeah, anytime you see a scarf on a woman's neck, she's a vampire.
I thought that was just to cover her hideous wrinkles.
But yeah, it's just so unfortunate because it definitely feels like, well, the movie is over, so let's get to the end. And I would have, loved a little bit more pathos in this, but Esmeralda just sacrifices herself because she doesn't want to be separated from him. So she plunges onto the stake and his body, and she dies on top of him.
Which felt very anticlimactic. Like, this poor woman who has spent the entire movie being told that she's an old hag and that she's not marriage material. And then the second she gets a husband, it turns into a vampire, she has to, like, die by suicide because he gets killed.
Yeah, it's anticlimactic, but only because I would have liked more. Like, it would have been interesting almost to watch the film from Esmeralda's perspective. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not the end because we have to watch Mario and Perla walk away. And in all of the reviews and academic pieces on this, everybody says like, oh, okay, I guess the peasants or the proletariat will inherit the villa because the assumption is he and Perla are together and then he will get all of this money.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why when the first time I saw this and it just ends, I was like, oh. That's the end of the movie.
Yeah, because she's in love with him now, of course.
Which, oh my God.
Because that's what happens. Joe D'Alessandro's dick is so magical.
It is, right? It's like the opposite of the Julia Cotton Frank.
Oh, the Frank thing.
Right? It's like, my God, that magical penis. What must it be made of?
I cannot.
So I do want to bring in Yakawar and Murphy one last time, just because I think we struggled with, like, what is the film's message? What does it actually believe? And I'll just say they believe that there is a specific takeaway. So Yakawar says, when Mario dispatches Dracula, he represents not the triumph of the people, but the replacement of one tyranny with another less dignified. And then Murphy kind of builds on this and says, Mario is equally corrupt, prone to sexual exploitation and violence to achieve his ideals. The final power shift in Blood for Dracula is therefore just one predatory politic consuming the former. So I don't know. I don't actually think that there's a right answer because the film is a little bit nebulous, but the way it ends does seem to suggest, okay, I don't think Mario winning this is for the best, which, I mean, I think we can all agree. Mario's not great.
No, Mario's a piece of shit. Oh yeah, you have me saying Mario. God damn it, Joe.
Mario. And then in the sequel, when the sister wakes up, the protagonist becomes Luigi.
Oh boy. Well, okay, everyone. That is Andy Warhol's Paul Morrissey's Blood for Dracula. Conrad, as the guest of honor, any final thoughts on this film?
Well, it was a joy to watch. I'd never seen any of Paul Morrissey's stroke Andy Warhol's brackets not really movies before. I kind of enjoyed the kitsch of it all. I enjoyed the fact that it was this weird combination of exploitative porn and amateurish acting with sort of like the sumptuous romanticism of 1930s Universal horrors and 1950s Hammer remakes. And a lot of it is very tongue-in-cheek and arch. And there's a lot going on. I'm amazed that he wrote it in the car every day, because it's shocking that it hangs together as well as it does, even though it's kind of ambivalent at the end. And I'm not particularly thrilled with any of the characters as heroes. But yeah, exactly. But it's constantly entertaining. There's something fascinating and weird and sort of melancholy about it. And some of it looks astonishingly good.
Yeah.
Not least Joe D'Alessandro's arse. So good. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, more or less exactly what Conrad said. It's just fun and weird and different and lurid. And, I was happy to have the opportunity, or the excuse rather, to check in with another Paul Morrissey joint. This just feels so different from anything that we might see. And I think you and I exchanged words about this offline, Trace, but this is a movie that simply would never get made.
No. Yeah, this would be canceled immediately upon release.
Yeah. But I guess the only other thing I have to say, and I know it's not her, but I kind of love the idea that it is, because you mentioned Universal Monsters, Conrad. The tavern woman.
Like Una O'Connor?
Looks exactly like Una O'Connor. Love it.
It felt so intentional. This is my second time watching this. I'll just echo both of your thoughts, but at the end of the day, I just find this a very fascinating product of film. It makes me think. It's sometimes really good, it's sometimes really bad. Sometimes I think it's intentional, sometimes I think it's don't. It's this kind of just perplexing anomaly that I am endlessly fascinated by.
Yeah.
Yep.
But all right. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Conrad, first, thank you for coming back on the show. But let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
Well, you can check us out at Movie Oubliette if you want to follow our podcast on forgotten fantastical films. Our next episode features none other than Joe Lipsett talking about the Australian Revenge of Nature movie Long Weekend from 1978. And if you head on over to The Queer Gaze on YouTube, you can watch Joe and I reacting to queer cinema from every country in the world and every decade in history that we could find. Most recently, an Udo Kier movie called House of Boys, where, he plays the Madame in a house of boys.
It's a quirky little oddity itself.
Oh my God. Okay, well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you have a moment or two, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 322 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Hannibal Season 1, Episode 8, Strange Darling, Trap, Alien Romulus, and to tie in with that last one, a brand new audio commentary on James Cameron's Aliens. Oh, shit, we've also got a special bonus episode on Sleepaway Camp 3 Teenage Wasteland for all patrons this month. So if you enjoyed our episodes on Sleepaway Camp 1 and 2, please go listen to that for $1 on the Patreon feed.
There we go. 35th anniversary.
35th anniversary. But Joe, what are we covering next week?
Well, Trace, we are staying in Europe, and things are not going to get any less weird or sexual, but they will involve more automobiles. So we're going to talk about Julia DeCarno's follow-up to Raw. We're going to talk about Den.
Yes, car fucking galore.
Well, for the first half at least. And then it gets real sad.
Yeah, arguably a trans allegory. Well, I'm sure we'll have lots to say next week. But until then, we can cross out Andy Warhol's Paul Morrissey's Blood for Dracula.
Still offensive. How dare you? And cross out horror queers.
What's up, everybody? I'm Prince, also known as Head Knight. I am one of the hosts of Nightlight, a horror movie podcast, that's Night with a K, by the way, on Bloody FM via Bloody Disgusting. Every week, we cover horror films based on a monthly thematic schedule. We've covered and celebrated black horror, found footage, and psychological horror, just to name a few. We discuss these films to uncover the ultimate question: why horror? We go extremely deep with the films in discussion. For us to accomplish this, we break down each film, scene by scene, spoiling literally everything. You can find Nightlight, a horror movie podcast, every Friday on your favorite podcast service. And remember, everybody, don't forget your Nightlight.
Welcome to Bloody FM's The Hotel, a horror podcast with new episodes on the 1st and 15th of every month. Each night a guest dies a horrifying and fantastic death in a hotel, that's me, who assumes the shape of anything from a 5-star resort down to a roadside roach motel. Ooh. Listen on the 1st and 15th of every month on Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Get in, losers. This is the Lady Killers, a Feminine Rage podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Sammy.
I'm Rocco.
And I'm May. Our podcast is a tribute to the female-identifying killers in horror and more.
Each episode will feature us, your Supreme Court of female murderers, discussing our favorite lady killers, from your Julias and Jennifers to your Carries and Christines.
We'll tell her story, decide if it's good for her horror, and answer the most important question of all: would we die for her?
Join us on Thursdays as we pull on our sweaters, snatch our ice picks, sharpen our scissors, and honor the lady killers who live on the silver screen.
No boys were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet.